Hi, I'm Rebecca, and I was the girlfriend who funded his dreams in silence until the night he introduced me as his friend at his company party after 4 years together. They said congratulations on his promotion while I stood there like a stranger, listening to him thank his young female coworker for her invaluable support in front of everyone who mattered to his career. But I wasn't his friend. I was his safety net. Not for that night. Not for the 4 years I'd paid his rent when clients didn't come through. Not when he gave credit for his success to a 25-year-old who'd known him 6 months. They didn't forget me. They erased me. And when I finally stopped paying, what happened next was never about money. It was about dignity. And what happens when you stop waiting for someone to choose you? Why would a woman walk away from a 4-year relationship and feel like she finally found her voice? When I stepped into the hotel lobby downtown, the chandelier flickered like it always had, casting shadows across walls that probably cost more per night than most people make in a week. I stood in that space, clutch gripped tight, watching David's work people scatter toward the bar like they owned the place. Success, they say, should be shared with the people who helped build it. Mine certainly hadn't been shared with me. The hotel ballroom looked exactly like David had described. High ceilings, big windows, round tables with white cloth, the regional sales achievement awards, 50-something colleagues and their partners. One night celebrating David's promotion to senior director, funded by my credit card since his cash flow had been tight this month. When David spotted me near the check-in table, his smile was the kind you give people you barely know. "Rebecca, you made it," he said, hand briefly touching my back, just enough to look coupled without actually claiming me. I wasn't sure about parking downtown. I'd offered to share an Uber, but he'd wanted to drive separately, in case he needed to stay late. Now, standing beside him as his colleagues walked up, I understood why. "David, congratulations on the promotion," said a woman with perfect hair and a handshake that could close deals. "And you must be—" There was a pause. That pause that happens when someone expects an introduction that doesn't come. "This is Rebecca," David said finally, voice cheerful but careful. "She's a good friend of mine." Friend. After 4 years of splitting bills and sharing a bed most nights, after covering his rent when his biggest client didn't pay for 6 months, after listening to him practice this exact speech in my living room while I paid for the dinner he'd suggested we grab together. "Nice to meet you, Rebecca," the woman said, shaking my hand with the kind of smile you give +1s you'll never see again. "I'm Jennifer, David's new VP. We're so excited to have him on the senior team." From where I stood, I could barely see the main room. Colleagues talked and laughed, hands pointed toward the award stage, and celebration floated past me like I was listening through water. Someone made a joke about sales numbers. I smiled. I'd heard about David's promotion from his roommate, who'd mentioned it while I was dropping off money for David's car repair. "So how do you know David?" Jennifer asked, sipping her welcome drink. "We've been—" I paused, waiting for David to say something. He was already looking around the room for better conversations. "We've been close for several years," I finished. A short silence. Jennifer lifted her glass, took another sip, and smoothly changed the subject. "David's been telling us about his move to the corner office. It's amazing how quickly he's adapted to senior responsibilities. Such independence." I set down my purse beside the guest book, where everyone was signing congratulations to David and his bright future. Of course, because adapting to leadership is impressive, while supporting someone through 4 years of career ups and downs somehow doesn't count. Success, I've learned, only counts when it fits their version. I looked around the cocktail area, photos on phones of David with his team, David at last month's client dinner, David getting his award nomination. In 4 years of these work events, there wasn't a single photo of us together. Maybe they got tired of explaining who I was. Maybe David stopped wanting them to know. They still think I'm just someone who hangs around, I thought, watching Jennifer get another drink. The casual friend, the person who shows up but doesn't really belong. It didn't matter that I'd transferred $3,000 last month to cover his moving expenses for this promotion, or that I'd helped write every cover letter that got him here. None of that makes you visible if he doesn't want to claim you. And maybe that's the point. This isn't celebration, it's show. Everyone plays their part. The successful guy, the supportive colleagues, the impressed company. Me, I'm the secret. Just as David finished talking to some senior partners, he came back to where I stood near the food table. He looked my way like he just remembered I was there. "I'm so glad you could make it tonight, Rebecca," he said, voice warm but distant. "Though I wasn't sure this kind of corporate thing was really your scene." The cocktail hour shifted. I felt several colleagues look toward me, not with curiosity, but with that polite look people give outsiders. I gripped my wine glass tighter, knuckles white beneath my bracelet, the same bracelet David had given me for my birthday, bought with money I'd lent him the week before. The smell of expensive food drifted from the kitchen, mixing with talk about stock options and partnerships, conversations that somehow never included the financial support that made David's risk-taking possible. From my spot near the silent auction, I tried to follow conversations, floating through the sound of clinking glasses and work laughter, but it felt like I was listening to a corporate party from another company. The colleagues around me moved when I tried to join conversations, and the smooth jazz was just background noise, filling the silence of not belonging. They talked about David's impressive sales numbers, his natural leadership, his bright future with the firm. I nodded when appropriate. When it got quiet, David's manager turned to me with the kind of smile you give someone when you're being polite, but not really interested. "So, Rebecca," he started, voice professional like a brief interview, "what do you do for work?" Before I could respond fully, David stepped in to redirect. "Rebecca works in nonprofit management," he said, eyes scanning the room instead of looking at me. "You know, small organizations, community stuff. Really nice work, though obviously not the same scale as what we do here." His manager gave an understanding nod, almost sympathetic, and added, "That's good. It's nice when people find what works for them." Then Jennifer appeared with another colleague, a man in his 40s who looked like he'd never had his career paid for by someone else. "Rebecca seems sweet," he said, thinking he was speaking quietly enough that I couldn't hear. "It's interesting that David brings friends to these events. Most of us bring our significant others." The room fell into one of those pauses where you can hear individual voices despite the crowd. David adjusted his tie, looking anywhere but at me. Jennifer stirred her drink, posting something to her work social media. I stayed quiet, stared at the hotel carpet, tracing its lines like they might lead somewhere else. I didn't flinch, not outside, but I felt something shift under my ribs. I used to think dismissal like this could only come from strangers. Turns out, it cuts deeper when it's from the person who sleeps in your bed twice a week while letting colleagues assume you're just some friend. I tightened my grip on my glass, knuckles pale beneath my dress, breath measured despite the ballroom's perfect air. My throat burned, but I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me blink faster. I'd learned that response over 4 years of being David's open secret. David reached for his phone like nothing had happened. "Let me check if dinner seating has been announced," he said, scrolling through what looked like work emails. "I want to make sure I'm positioned well for networking tonight." Jennifer jumped in without missing a beat. "Smart thinking. These dinners are really about building relationships with the senior partners, though I guess not everyone here needs to worry about that kind of strategic positioning." Her colleague smiled, like he was in on a joke everyone else knew. "Right. Some people can just enjoy the party without all the career pressure." I wanted to stand, throw something, scream that I'd been strategically positioning myself for 4 years, not for my own career, but to financially position David for his. But instead, I let their voices play out like hotel background music while my mind did math. $3,000 last month for his moving expenses. 18 months of splitting his rent when his commission structure changed. 4 years of funding his networking dinners, his work clothes, his investment in building relationships that apparently didn't include publicly claiming mine. You act like I don't understand career strategy, I said silently. Like it wasn't me who suggested the client entertainment you used to close your biggest deals. Like I didn't choose to invest in your success instead of my own. I held my jaw tight and smiled, because that's what you do when the person you've been supporting treats you like a problem in front of the career you helped build. Beside me, David's assistant from his old department touched my arm gently. "Rebecca, right?" she said quietly. "I remember you from the holiday party last year." No judgment, just recognition. I looked at her, and for a second our eyes met. She remembered when David had introduced me differently. That's when they announced dinner, and everyone moved toward the ballroom seating. I expected to sit at David's table, probably next to him where we could actually share this moment he'd been working toward. Instead, I found my place card at a table near the back, tucked between David's old assistant and someone's teenage daughter who'd been brought as a last-minute guest. From this spot, I could barely see the head table where David sat with the senior partners and award recipients, and my back was to the stage where he'd be giving his speech. The conversation around me was polite but broken, pieces of small talk floating past me like I was listening to a different party. Someone at my table asked about the weather. There was talk about parking downtown. I smiled when it seemed right and contributed when someone spoke to me directly, which happened exactly twice during the 3 courses. The salad arrived, some fancy arrangement that probably cost $40 per plate. I ate quietly, listening to the celebration happening at tables I couldn't see. From the front of the room came laughter about inside jokes and shared victories. David's voice occasionally carried over the crowd, animated and confident in a way that used to make me proud. "So how do you know David?" asked the woman sitting across from me, making conversation during a quiet moment. It was a simple question that should have had a simple answer. "We've been together for 4 years, I said, then immediately wished I hadn't. "Oh," she replied, glancing toward the head table where David was clearly engaged with his work peers. "I thought, never mind. That's nice that you're such good friends." The main course came and went. Beef that was expensive and perfectly cooked. Wine flowed at the other tables, chosen by people who understood which bottles impressed senior partners. No one at my table discussed David's career path or asked about my role in his success story. Not that I expected public credit for every deposit I'd made into his life, but sitting at my back table, watching David network with people who would determine his future while I remained an afterthought, I felt something expand in my chest. Something that had been carefully held for 4 years began to fill the space around my heart. During dessert, some elaborate chocolate thing that probably required advanced planning, the speeches began. David's manager stood first, tapping his wine glass with practiced ease. "Tonight we celebrate not just individual achievement, but the kind of leadership that drives our entire organization forward," he began, voice carrying easily across the ballroom. "David Martinez represents everything we value: independence, innovation, and the courage to take calculated risks that deliver exceptional results." Everyone clapped. I clapped too, though the irony of celebrating David's independence while sitting at a table funded by my financial dependents wasn't lost on me. "What makes David's success especially impressive," Jennifer added, standing to join the tribute, "is how he's built his career entirely through his own efforts. No shortcuts, no favors, just pure talent and determination. He's never needed anyone to carry him. He's always been self-sufficient." More clapping, more agreement. I set down my wine glass and stared at my reflection in the dark window beside me. In the glass, I could see the warm glow of the ballroom, the animated faces around the head table, the way everyone leaned toward the stage like an audience waiting for inspiration. I could also see myself, sitting alone in the back, separate from the celebration I'd helped fund. Then David stood, and the room fell into that particular silence reserved for moments of recognition. He smiled with genuine warmth, the expression I'd fallen in love with 4 years ago when he was still grateful for support instead of ashamed of needing it. "I want to thank everyone who made this possible," he began, voice confident and clear. "This promotion represents not just personal achievement, but the incredible support system I've had at this company." He paused, looking around the room. His eyes passed over my table briefly, not with recognition, but with the same polite look he might give catering staff. "I especially want to thank Jennifer, whose mentorship over the past 6 months has been invaluable," he continued. "Her guidance, her insights, her willingness to invest time in my development. I honestly couldn't have reached this level without her belief in my potential." The words hit me like cold air after hours inside. 6 months of mentorship versus 4 years of financial and emotional support, and guess which one earned public gratitude? "Jennifer represents the kind of professional relationship that elevates everyone involved," David continued, gesturing toward her table. "She saw my capabilities before I saw them myself. She invested in my success without expecting anything in return. That's the definition of true support." Jennifer stood to acknowledge the praise, beaming. The applause was enthusiastic, genuine, the kind reserved for partnerships that everyone admires. I felt every person in the room carefully not looking toward my table, while simultaneously understanding exactly what David's speech had revealed about our relationship. The silence around my chair was loud. "Finally," David said, raising his glass, "I want to thank everyone here who understands what it means to earn success through your own efforts, to build something meaningful without compromising your independence, to create value that speaks for itself." "To independence," the room said together, glasses clinking in celebration of a principle that was apparently built on my invisible contributions. I lifted my glass automatically, but I didn't drink. Instead, I sat there as David's speech ended, as the evening moved toward its networking finale, as I realized that somewhere along the way, I'd become the secret that enabled his success story. The financial support was essential, but my existence was an embarrassment. When the formal program ended and people began moving toward the after-party bar, there was the usual flurry of congratulations and business card exchanges. I remained at my table, watching colleagues approach David with handshakes and career opportunities. David's old assistant paused as she walked past my table. "Rebecca," she said quietly, "I just want you to know, I remember how proud he used to be to introduce you. Something changed, and I don't think it was anything you did." I smiled and thanked her, but her words hit harder than David's speech had. She remembered when I mattered enough to claim publicly. When most of the crowd had moved to the bar area, I finally stood and walked toward the restroom, needing a moment away from the celebration that had somehow become my humiliation. In the hallway, I heard David's voice from around the corner, talking to someone I couldn't see. "Rebecca's great, but you know how it is," he was saying, tone casual, almost apologetic. "She's been around forever, super helpful with practical stuff, but she doesn't really understand the business world. Tonight's about building serious professional relationships." "Isn't she your girlfriend?" the other voice asked. There was a pause. "It's complicated. She's more like emotional support, I guess. Really reliable for day-to-day stuff, but not exactly executive material. I mean, she works for a nonprofit. Sweet, but not ambitious in the way that matters for my trajectory." "Ah," the voice said, understanding. "One of those women who just hangs around hoping things will develop into something serious." David laughed. Not meanly, but with the kind of casual dismissal that cuts deeper than anger. "Pretty much. I keep thinking I should probably address it at some point, but she's so convenient to have around. I stood frozen in that hotel hallway, listening to the person I'd been financially and emotionally supporting for 4 years reduce me to convenient and emotional support, to a colleague whose respect he wanted to maintain. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I just felt something inside me shift from hope to clarity. I walked back to my table, gathered my purse, and approached David at the bar where he was networking with senior partners. "David," I said quietly, touching his arm, "I'm heading home." He turned with surprise, apparently having forgotten I was still there. "Already? The real networking hasn't even started yet." "I know," I said. "That's exactly why I'm leaving." Something in my tone made him focus on me for the first time all evening. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I replied. "I just finally understand exactly where I stand." I walked toward the exit without waiting for his response, my heels clicking across the hotel's marble floor with a rhythm that sounded like punctuation marks ending a very long sentence. Behind me, I could hear the party continuing, conversations about quarterly goals and partnership tracks, the sound of people building careers and relationships that mattered to their futures. I didn't turn around. Back in my apartment, the same space where David had practiced his speech, where I'd listened to his anxieties about the promotion, where he'd borrowed money for the suit he'd worn tonight. I sat on my couch and finally let myself feel the full weight of the evening. My phone buzzed. A text from David. "Hey, sorry you left early. These things run late, but they're important for my career. Hope you understand." I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "I understand perfectly." He didn't respond. I opened my laptop and logged into my banking app. The automatic transfers I'd set up to help with David's expenses were scheduled to continue indefinitely, money flowing from my account to support someone who introduced me as a friend and described me as convenient to colleagues who would never see me as anything more than an accessory. My cursor hovered over the account settings. With a few clicks, I could cancel everything. The rent assistance, the car payment help, the credit card that covered his networking dinners and professional wardrobe. For the first time in 4 years, I didn't hesitate. The next morning, I woke to missed calls and increasingly frantic text messages from David. "My rent payment didn't go through," read the first message, sent at 7:43 a.m. "Can you call me? There's some kind of banking error," read the second. "Rebecca, I need to talk to you. Something's wrong with my accounts," read the third. I called him back at 9 a.m. after I'd had coffee and dressed for my own workday. "Rebecca, thank God," he said, voice tight with anxiety. "There's been some kind of mistake with my automatic payments. My rent, my car payment, even my credit card. Everything bounced." "There's no mistake," I said calmly. "I canceled all the transfers." Silence. Then, "You canceled them? Why?" "Because I refuse to financially support someone who's ashamed to publicly acknowledge my existence." "That's not... Last night wasn't about that." "Last night was exactly about that, David. It was about 4 years of you accepting my support while treating me like a liability in front of people who matter to your career." "Rebecca, you're overreacting." "Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've built a career on my financial foundation while describing me as convenient emotional support to colleagues who don't even know we're together." The pause that followed told me he remembered exactly what he'd said in that hallway. "You heard that?" "I heard that, and everything else, including the part where you laughed about me being one of those women who hangs around hoping for something serious." "I didn't mean..." "You meant exactly what you said. The question is whether you meant for me to hear it." "Can we talk about this in person?" "We can," I said. "But come prepared to have an actual conversation about what you want from this relationship, not just a discussion about reinstating your financial support." He arrived that evening looking like he hadn't slept, his usual confidence replaced with something that looked like panic mixed with genuine confusion. We sat in my living room, the same space where he'd borrowed my laptop to apply for the job that led to last night's promotion, where I'd helped with cover letters and provided emotional support through 4 years of career anxiety. "I don't understand why you're making this about money," he said finally. "I'm not making this about money. I'm making this about respect." "But I do respect you." "Do you?" "Because respect doesn't introduce the person who's been supporting them for 4 years as a friend. Respect doesn't accept financial help while describing the provider as convenient and not ambitious enough to matter." That conversation wasn't... I was trying to fit in with those guys. You know how corporate politics work. No, David. I know how authenticity works. And authentic people don't build their professional image by minimizing the contributions of people who've made their success possible. I stood up and walked to my desk, returning with the folder I'd prepared that morning. Inside were printouts of every transfer, every shared expense, every financial contribution I'd made to his life over 4 years. $37,000, I said, setting down the papers. "That's what your independence cost me." David stared at the documents like they contained information he'd never seen before. "I never asked you to keep track," he said quietly. "You never asked me anything. You just accepted support while positioning yourself as self-made to people whose opinions mattered more than mine. But you offered to help. I offered to help someone who was building a life with me, not someone who was using me to build a life without me." We sat in silence for several minutes. David eventually picked up one of the bank statements, studying it like evidence of something he'd tried not to see. "What do you want from me, Rebecca?" "I want honesty about what this relationship actually is. I want clarity about whether you see a future with me, or whether I'm just temporary support while you figure out what you really want." "Of course I see a future." "Do you? Because after 4 years, you still introduce me as a friend. After 4 years, you still describe our relationship as complicated to colleagues. After 4 years, you still haven't made any public commitment to building something together. Relationships don't need to be public to be real." "No, but they need to be acknowledged, to be respected. And you've spent 4 years accepting my support while making it clear that acknowledging me publicly would somehow damage your professional image. That's not what last night was about. Last night was about exactly that. It was about you choosing your career image over our relationship truth. It was about me finally understanding that I've been convenient, not cherished. The money stops now, not because I don't care about you, but because I won't continue funding someone who's embarrassed to claim me." "What about us?" "There is no us, David. There's you, and there's someone who's been supporting you while you figure out what you actually want." David left that night with the understanding that our relationship had fundamentally changed. Not because of the money, but because of what the money had been hiding. His inability to commit publicly to someone he was perfectly comfortable depending on privately. I sat in my apartment afterward, not crying, not regretting, just breathing freely for the first time in months. The next morning, I woke up without the familiar weight of managing someone else's financial stress. I called my bank and opened a new savings account, one for my own goals instead of someone else's dreams. Then I called my boss about the promotion I'd been putting off because I thought I needed to stay financially available for David's expenses. 2 weeks later, David called. "I've been thinking about what you said, about respect and acknowledgement and everything." "Good," I replied. "I think I understand now why last night felt so wrong to you, why the whole thing was problematic." "Do you?" "You weren't just my guest at that party. You were my partner, and I treated you like someone I was doing a favor by including." "Yes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for taking your support for granted, for accepting your help while being ashamed to claim you publicly, for building my success on your foundation while describing you as temporary to people whose opinions I thought mattered more." Thank you. That acknowledgement means more than you know. Can we try again? Differently this time. It's too late for that, David. What do you mean? I mean, 4 years was long enough to figure out if you wanted to be with me publicly. I'm not giving you another 4 to decide if I'm worth acknowledging. But I understand now. You understand because you got caught. Because I heard what you really think of me. That's not the same as actually valuing me. He sat forward, panic creeping into his voice. Rebecca, please. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. No, I said quietly. We can't. Because you didn't mess up. You showed me exactly who you are. And I finally listened. I walked to my desk and pulled out another envelope. Remember when I mentioned that promotion I was considering? The one in Seattle? His face went pale. You said you weren't sure about it. I wasn't sure because I thought I had something here worth staying for. Turns out I was wrong. I handed him the letter. I accepted it this morning. I start in 6 weeks. David stared at the letter like it contained his death sentence. You're leaving? Just like that? Just like that. What about us? What about everything we built together? What did we build, David? Really? You built a career. I paid for it. That's not a relationship. That's a transaction. His voice cracked. I love you. For 4 years, those were the words I'd been waiting to hear said like he meant them. Now they just sounded desperate. Maybe you do, I said, but not enough to introduce me properly at the most important night of your career. Not enough to thank me in front of people who mattered to you. Not enough to stop describing me as convenient support to colleagues you barely know. I was scared. Of what? Of people knowing you had a girlfriend? Of them thinking less of you for being supported by someone who works in nonprofit? He couldn't answer. That's what I thought. I stood up. I'll be moved out by the end of the month. The utilities are in your name now. You'll figure it out. Rebecca, wait. But I was already walking toward the door. 3 weeks later, as I was packing the last of my books, David showed up at my apartment. He looked like he hadn't slept since our conversation. Hollow-eyed, rumpled, desperate. I told them, he said without preamble. At work, I told everyone who you really are, what you meant to me, what you did for my career. I didn't look up from my boxes. Good for you. I brought photos of us to put on my desk. I changed my relationship status on LinkedIn. David. I finally looked at him. You're doing all this because I'm leaving. Where was this honesty when I was staying? I was scared of looking weak. So you made me disappear instead. He started crying then. Not just tears, but the kind of crying that comes from understanding you've lost something irreplaceable through your own choices. I don't know how to fix this, he whispered. You can't, I said, not unkindly. Some things can't be fixed, David. They can only be learned from... Is there anything I can do? Anything at all? I thought about it for a moment. Yeah, don't do this to the next person. There won't be a next person. There's only you. No, I said, taping up the last box. There was only me. And you chose your image over me every single day for 4 years. That's not love. That's convenience. He stood in my doorway as I loaded my car, watching 4 years of our life fit into the back of a Honda Civic. I'll wait for you, he called as I got in the driver's seat. I rolled down the window. Don't. Learn to be the kind of person worth waiting for instead. 6 months later, I got a text from David. A screenshot of his company's newsletter. There was a photo of him at some work event with a woman I didn't recognize. The caption read, David Martinez and his girlfriend Sarah at the annual client appreciation dinner. Below it, he'd written, I learned. I smiled, deleted the message, and went back to planning my presentation for the Seattle nonprofit coalition I was now leading. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the chance to prove they can grow without you holding their hand. Sometimes love looks like walking away when staying would only enable someone's worst patterns. And sometimes, the person who benefits most from letting go is the one who finally finds the courage to choose themselves. The company party where I was introduced as a friend became the night I stopped waiting for someone else to give me the respect I deserved. And unlike corporate networking events, real respect doesn't require anyone to perform. It simply exists.